The hum of Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport echoed through the cavernous terminal, where hurried footsteps and the occasional crackling of announcements blended into a chaotic symphony. Emily Carter adjusted the strap of her designer handbag, its polished leather glinting under the fluorescent lights. Her manicured fingers tapped impatiently against her phone screen as she scrolled through emails, already irritated by the long line for first-class check-in. "This is ridiculous," Emily muttered under her breath, loud enough for the man in front of her to glance back uncomfortably. First class shouldn't feel like economy. She shifted her weight onto one stiletto-clad foot, letting out an audible sigh. Ahead, a tall woman with striking poise stepped forward in line. Olivia Brooks radiated elegance, dressed in a tailored navy pantsuit that fit her like it was custom-made. Her natural curls framed her face, and she carried herself with an ease that drew subtle glances from passers-by. Emily noticed Olivia immediately, but not for the right reasons. Her lips pursed as she took in the sight of Olivia placing her carry-on on the scale. "What is this?" she muttered again, this time turning slightly to the man behind her as if seeking an ally. "I didn't realize first class had become so inclusive these days." The man's eyes widened in surprise. He opened his mouth to respond but thought better of it, stepping back a little to avoid further involvement. Unbothered by the comment, Olivia calmly handed over her passport and ticket to the airline staff. Her movements were unhurried, her voice soft but commanding as she exchanged polite words with the attendant. Emily, however, wasn't done. "Excuse me," Emily said loudly, stepping forward, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. "Is there an issue here? This line seems to be moving slower than usual." Her eyes flickered toward Olivia. The airline staff, a young woman with a professional smile plastered on her face, glanced up nervously. "No issue, ma'am. We'll be with you shortly." Emily wasn't satisfied. She tilted her head toward Olivia, speaking as though she weren't standing right there. "It's just that some of us have places to be and people to see. I didn't expect this kind of delay in the first-class line." Olivia turned her head slowly, meeting Emily's gaze for the first time. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes carried a weight that made Emily's words falter for a split second. "I'm sure we all have places to be," Olivia said evenly, her voice calm yet firm. "Patience is a virtue, isn't it?" Emily bristled, the subtle rebuke igniting her irritation further. "Oh, I see. One of those. Look, I don't mean to be rude, but first-class passengers usually understand how things work around here. It's just surprising, that's all." The implied insult hung in the air, thick and uncomfortable. Nearby passengers exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort palpable. Olivia didn't flinch. Instead, she gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I understand perfectly," Olivia replied. "But thank you for your concern." Emily's cheeks flushed slightly, though she masked it with a condescending laugh. "Well, I hope so. It's not every day you see," she trailed off, her words pointed but unfinished. The airline attendant interrupted the brewing tension. "Ms. Brooks, everything is in order. You're all set for your flight. Please proceed to the lounge if you'd like." "Thank you," Olivia said, taking her documents back. She turned to Emily briefly, her gaze steady but devoid of malice. "Have a pleasant flight." Emily barely managed a curt nod as Olivia walked away, her heels clicking softly against the floor. The moment she was out of earshot, Emily leaned toward the attendant. "Are you sure she's supposed to be here?" Emily asked in a stage whisper. "I mean first class? Really?" The young woman froze, her professional smile faltering for a brief second. "Ms. Brooks is a valued passenger," she said diplomatically. "If you'll excuse me, I need to assist the next customer." Emily's annoyance bubbled beneath the surface as she completed her own check-in process. By the time she reached the first-class lounge, her mood hadn't improved. Spotting Olivia seated in a quiet corner, sipping tea and scrolling through her phone, only reignited her frustration. Without thinking, Emily strode over to a seat nearby, plopping her bag down on the table with an unnecessary thud. Olivia glanced up briefly, her expression unreadable, before returning her attention to her phone. "So," Emily began, crossing her legs and leaning back in her chair, "are you traveling for business or pleasure?" Olivia didn't look up. Business. Ah, interesting, Emily said, feigning politeness. What line of work are you in? Olivia paused, setting her phone down deliberately. Her gaze met Emily's, calm but piercing. Aviation. Emily raised an eyebrow. Oh, like as a flight attendant or something? The condescension in her tone was unmistakable. Olivia held her gaze for a moment longer before replying, something like that. Before Emily could probe further, an announcement over the intercom signaled the start of boarding for their flight. Olivia stood gracefully, gathering her belongings and walking toward the gate without another word. Emily followed shortly after, her irritation now mixed with curiosity. As they boarded, Emily noticed that Olivia's seat was just one row ahead of hers, by the window. Settling into her own plush first-class seat, Emily couldn't resist the urge to whisper to the passenger beside her. "Do you know her?" she asked, gesturing subtly toward Olivia. The man shook his head. "Well, it's odd, isn't it?" Emily continued. "She doesn't exactly look like the type who'd belong here." The man frowned, clearly uncomfortable. "I think you should let it go," he said quietly, turning his attention to the in-flight magazine. Emily huffed, sinking back into her seat as the flight attendants prepared for takeoff. She couldn't shake the feeling that something about Olivia didn't add up, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Unbeknownst to her, Olivia had overheard every word. But instead of reacting, she closed her eyes, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. This was going to be an interesting flight. The plane had just reached cruising altitude when Emily leaned back in her seat, already feeling the sting of regret for not ordering a pre-flight cocktail. She glanced toward the front of the cabin, where Olivia sat, sipping from a glass of sparkling water, her posture regal and unbothered. Emily couldn't resist another attempt to dissect her curiosity. Grabbing her tablet, she opened the in-flight Wi-Fi and began typing furiously into the search bar. Olivia Brooks Aviation. What popped up next made her freeze. There, on the first page of results, was a glowing article from a major business magazine, Meet Olivia Brooks, the visionary behind Horizon Airways' meteoric success. The words hit Emily like a gust of turbulence. CEO? Founder? Her? Her stomach twisted. For a moment, Emily considered letting it go, but her curiosity and ego won out. She leaned forward, pressing the call button above her seat. A flight attendant appeared moments later. "Yes, ma'am? How can I assist you?" Emily leaned in, her voice low but sharp. "The woman sitting in 2A. Olivia Brooks. Is she the Olivia Brooks? From Horizon Airways?" The attendant hesitated, her smile tightening. "Yes, ma'am. She is." Emily's face turned a shade paler. Why didn't anyone say anything? I mean, shouldn't someone have mentioned? "Miss Brooks values her privacy," the attendant interrupted gently. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" "No, Emily waved her off, her cheeks burning. "Never mind." As the attendant walked away, Emily sank back into her seat, her mind racing. The woman she had humiliated, wasn't just a passenger. She was the literal owner of the airline. Emily's thoughts spiraled. What if Olivia filed a complaint? What if she refused to let this go? Emily's reputation was pristine in her business circles, carefully maintained through years of strategic networking. A scandal involving racism and public humiliation wasn't something she could afford. Determined to regain control of the situation, Emily stood, adjusting her blazer as if preparing for battle. She marched down the aisle, her heels clicking against the carpeted floor, and stopped beside Olivia's seat. "Miss Brooks," Emily began, her voice tight. Olivia glanced up from her book, her expression serene. "Yes?" Emily forced a smile, her nerves betraying her in a faint tremor. I wanted to apologize for earlier. I may have been abrupt." Olivia's brow arched slightly, but she said nothing, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. "I didn't realize," Emily added, gesturing vaguely, "who you were." Olivia closed her book, setting it down with deliberate precision. "And who am I, exactly?" Emily's mouth opened, then closed. She swallowed hard. "Well, I mean, you're important, obviously." "Important," Olivia repeated, her tone even. Interesting choice of words. Emily's smile faltered. I just meant that I respect everything you've done. Horizon Airways is an incredible company. Is that so? Olivia's gaze never wavered. Because not long ago, you seemed to think this airline had lowered its standards. Emily's face burned. I didn't mean it like that. Olivia held up a hand, silencing her. Let me stop you right there, Miss Carter. Emily's name on Olivia's lips felt like a punch to the gut. How did she know her name? I've encountered people like you my entire career, Olivia continued, her voice calm but laced with steel. People who assume, based on nothing but their own prejudices, that they know who belongs and who doesn't. Let me be clear, your opinion of me or anyone else in this cabin is irrelevant. But your behavior. She leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering. That tells me everything I need to know about you. Emily's throat tightened. She struggled to find a response, but Olivia's unwavering gaze rendered her speechless. After a long pause, Olivia leaned back in her seat, her composure intact. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to return to my book. Emily nodded stiffly, retreating down the aisle to her seat. Her palms were clammy, and her heart pounded in her chest. She had never felt so small, so utterly insignificant. For the rest of the flight, Emily avoided looking in Olivia's direction. Every passing glance from the flight attendants felt like a judgment, their polite smiles now tinged with something she couldn't quite place. Midway through the flight, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge a very special guest on board today. Ms. Olivia Brooks, the founder and CEO of Horizon Airways, is traveling with us this afternoon. On behalf of the crew and passengers, we'd like to thank Ms. Brooks for her vision and leadership, which have made this airline what it is today. A round of applause erupted in the cabin. Emily sank lower in her seat, her cheeks flaming with embarrassment. She dared a glance toward Olivia, who accepted the recognition with a gracious nod, her smile warm but restrained. The applause eventually died down, but Emily's humiliation lingered, heavy and suffocating. She stared out the window, the clouds below blurring as tears stung her eyes. As the flight prepared for landing, Emily toyed with the idea of apologizing again, but the knot in her stomach told her it wouldn't matter. Olivia didn't need her apology. She had already won. When the plane touched down and the passengers began gathering their belongings, Emily hesitated, watching as Olivia rose gracefully from her seat. She wanted to say something, anything, to salvage what little dignity she had left. But Olivia didn't even glance in her direction as she exited the cabin, her presence commanding attention without effort. Emily remained seated, her hands gripping the armrests as the realization settled over her. This wasn't just about one encounter or one mistake. It was about who she had allowed herself to become and the work it would take to change that. Emily sat frozen in her seat long after most passengers had to board. Her palms were damp, her breathing uneven. The humiliation she'd endured wasn't just public, it had cracked open something far deeper. What had started as a moment of misplaced superiority had turned into a mirror she wasn't ready to look into. A soft knock on her armrest jolted her. One of the flight attendants stood beside her, concern etched on her face. Miss Carter, is everything okay? We'll need to prepare the cabin for the next flight soon.
Oh, yes.
Of course. Emily fumbled to gather her things, her movements jerky. I just lost track of time. The attendant offered a kind smile but said nothing, stepping aside to let Emily leave. As she walked through the jet bridge and into the bustling terminal, Emily spotted Olivia ahead, her posture effortlessly poised, surrounded by a small crowd. A journalist held a microphone out to her while a camera operator adjusted their equipment. Ms. Brooks, a quick word about your recent donation, the journalist asked eagerly. Olivia paused, her expression serene but focused. I'm happy to share, she said. Her voice carried an unmistakable warmth, drawing the attention of nearby travelers who began to gather. Emily stopped a few steps away, her curiosity outweighing her lingering embarrassment. The donation to the American Center for Racial Equity, Olivia began, isn't just about writing a check. It's about action, accountability, and acknowledging that systemic change requires all of us, individually and collectively, to do the work. I've experienced firsthand the barriers created by prejudice, but I've also seen how determination and allyship can break them down. This is just one step in a much larger journey. The crowd clapped, murmurs of admiration rippling through the terminal. Olivia's eyes scanned the group briefly, landing on Emily for the briefest of moments. Emily's breath caught, but Olivia's expression didn't shift. No malice, no triumph, just quiet composure. "Ms. Brooks, one more question," another journalist called out. "What inspired this particular initiative?" Olivia offered a small smile. "Inspiration often comes from unexpected places. Sometimes it's the people who challenge us directly or indirectly who remind us why this work is so important." Emily felt the weight of those words like a physical blow. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. As Olivia finished her remarks and the crowd began to disperse, Emily found herself rooted to the spot. Against every instinct, she took a hesitant step forward. "Miss Brooks," she called, her voice trembling slightly. Olivia turned, her expression unreadable. The two women stood a few feet apart, the noise of the terminal seeming to fade around them. Emily faltered, clutching the strap of her bag. "I wanted to say that what you're doing is remarkable."
Truly.
Olivia nodded politely. "Thank you. And I also," Emily hesitated, the words sticking in her throat. "I owe you a proper apology. I was wrong about everything. About you, about how I acted. It was unacceptable, and I'm sorry." The sincerity in her voice surprised even her. For a moment, Olivia said nothing, her gaze searching Emily's face. "Apologies are a good start," Olivia said finally. Her tone was measured, neither dismissive nor forgiving. "But the real work comes after. I hope you're ready for that." Emily nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I am. Or at least, I want to be." Olivia's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then I'll leave you with this piece of advice. Listen more than you speak. You might be surprised by what you learn." With that, Olivia turned and walked away, her presence as commanding as ever. Emily stood there, a strange mix of relief and discomfort washing over her. Olivia hadn't absolved her, hadn't smoothed over the situation with pleasantries or platitudes. Instead, she'd given Emily a challenge to be better. And for the first time in years, Emily realized she wanted to rise to it. Emily walked out of the terminal feeling exposed, as if the world had turned its spotlight on her flaws. Every interaction replayed in her mind, her dismissive remarks, her entitlement, the way she'd assumed Olivia didn't belong. The days that followed were no easier. At her office, Emily tried to bury herself in work, but the gnawing sense of shame refused to leave her. She couldn't stop thinking about Olivia's composure, her strength. Even more, she couldn't forget Olivia's words, "The real work comes after." Late one evening, after yet another sleepless night, Emily sat down at her desk with her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant but determined. Finally, she typed "Olivia Brooks donation racial equity." Dozens of articles popped up, each one painting a picture of Olivia's tireless commitment to social justice. Emily clicked on one headline: Horizon Airways CEO donates $5 million to American Center for Racial Equity. The article detailed Olivia's philanthropic efforts, her personal story of overcoming systemic barriers, and her dedication to creating opportunities for marginalized communities. At the bottom of the page, a link invited readers to donate or learn more. Emily clicked it without hesitation. The website was sleek and informative, outlining the organization's mission and its ongoing initiatives. Scrolling further, she found a section titled Get Involved. Her cursor hovered over the options: donate, volunteer, attend events. Emily's first instinct was to write a check. It was what she knew best. But something about that felt hollow, insufficient. With a deep breath, she clicked on volunteer. The next day, Emily found herself in a modest office downtown, surrounded by people whose passion and drive radiated from every corner. She felt out of place, her designer blazer and heels contrasting starkly with the casual energy of the space. A cheerful woman greeted her at the front desk. "Hi there. Are you here to volunteer?" "Yes," Emily said, her voice quieter than usual. "I saw the website and thought I could help in some way." "Wonderful. Let me grab someone to show you around." A few moments later, a man in his mid-30s approached, his warm smile instantly putting Emily at ease. "I'm Marcus, one of the program coordinators. Welcome." As Marcus led her through the office, Emily took in the walls covered with photos and testimonials from individuals the organization had supported. Each story felt like a window into a world she'd never truly seen before. They stopped in front of a conference room where a small group was preparing materials for an upcoming event. "We're hosting a fundraiser this weekend," Marcus explained. "We could use an extra set of hands if you're interested." "I'd love to help," Emily said, surprising herself with the eagerness in her voice. For the next few hours, Emily worked alongside the team, folding pamphlets, organizing supplies, and listening as they shared stories of their work. It was humbling, but in a way that felt strangely liberating. For the first time in years, Emily wasn't in charge. She wasn't the expert. She was simply there to learn and contribute. As the fundraiser approached, Emily threw herself into the preparations, finding unexpected joy in the collaboration. On the day of the event, she arrived early, wearing a simple blouse and flats instead of her usual high-end attire. The venue buzzed with energy as guests began to arrive, mingling and exploring the exhibits. Emily stayed in the background, helping where needed and soaking in the atmosphere. Then, just as the program was about to begin, a familiar figure stepped onto the stage. Olivia Brooks. Emily's breath hitched. She hadn't expected Olivia to be here, let alone take center stage. "Good evening," Olivia began, her voice calm and assured. "Thank you all for being here tonight. Your presence and support mean more than words can express." As Olivia spoke, Emily felt a wave of conflicting emotions. Gratitude for the path Olivia had unknowingly set her on. Shame for the way she had treated her. Admiration for the impact Olivia continued to make. When the speech ended and the applause died down, Marcus approached Emily with a knowing smile. "I see you've spotted our star speaker." Emily nodded, unable to hide her awe. "She's incredible." "She really is," Marcus agreed. "Would you like to meet her? I could introduce you." Emily froze. Part of her wanted to decline, to avoid reopening the wound of their previous encounter. But another part of her, a stronger, braver part, knew this was an opportunity she couldn't pass up. "Yes," she said finally. "I'd like that." Marcus led her to a quieter corner of the venue, where Olivia was speaking with a small group of guests. When she noticed Marcus, she excused herself and turned toward them, her expression polite but guarded. "Olivia, this is Emily," Marcus said, gesturing toward her. Olivia's eyes flickered with recognition. For a moment, neither woman spoke. I wasn't expecting to see you here," Olivia said finally, her tone neutral. "I wasn't expecting to be here," Emily admitted. "But I'm glad I am. And I owe that, in part, to you." Olivia tilted her head slightly, intrigued. "How so?" Emily took a deep breath. "Your words, your work. It made me take a hard look at myself. I realized how much I needed to change, and I've started trying to do that. Volunteering here has been a part of that journey." Olivia studied her for a long moment. Then, to Emily's surprise, her expression softened. "Change isn't easy," Olivia said. "But recognizing the need for it is the first step. I hope you'll keep going." "I will," Emily promised. For the first time since their paths had crossed, Olivia smiled, genuine and warm. "Good luck, Emily." As Olivia walked away, Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This wasn't the end of her journey, but it was a step in the right direction. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Months passed, and Emily's transformation, while not easy, began to take root. She continued volunteering with the American Center for Racial Equity, finding ways to contribute beyond the surface. From hosting workshops on diversity to using her business expertise to secure funding for initiatives, Emily was finally putting her privilege to meaningful use. Her colleagues began to notice the change. Where Emily once exuded arrogance, there was now a quiet humility. She listened more, spoke less, and approached situations with an openness that surprised even herself. But the true test came on a crisp autumn evening when Emily was invited to attend the center's annual gala. The event, a celebration of progress and perseverance, was a glittering affair, with notable figures from business, politics, and philanthropy in attendance. Emily felt both proud and nervous to be there, knowing how far she'd come but aware there was still so much to learn. As the evening unfolded, Emily mingled with other guests, sharing stories of her work and learning from theirs. But one moment stood out above all. Toward the end of the program, Olivia Brooks took the stage. Clad in an elegant black gown, she carried herself with the same grace and authority Emily had first noticed months ago. "Good evening," Olivia began, her voice commanding the room's attention. "Tonight, we celebrate not only the work we've accomplished, but also the journeys that brought us here. Change, as many of us know, is not linear. It is uncomfortable, imperfect, and often met with resistance. But it is possible. And it starts with recognizing our own capacity to grow." Emily felt her chest tighten. She knew Olivia wasn't speaking about her specifically, but the words resonated deeply. As the applause filled the room, Olivia continued, "I'd like to recognize one such journey tonight. Someone who took accountability and transformed it into action. Please join me in thanking Emily Carter for her outstanding contributions to our programs this year." The room erupted in applause as a spotlight found Emily. Her cheeks flushed, and for a moment, she was paralyzed by the attention. Then, summoning her courage, she stood, nodding humbly in acknowledgement. As the applause died down, Olivia spoke again. "Emily's story reminds us that change is not about perfection. It's about intention, effort, and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths within ourselves. Her work has made a difference, and I'm proud to call her an ally." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she sat back down. The weight of Olivia's words felt both overwhelming and validating. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Emily approached Olivia. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Not just for tonight, but for everything." Olivia smiled, her warmth cutting through the formal air of the gala. "You've already thanked me by doing the work. That's all I ever hoped for." Emily nodded, her heart full. "I'll keep doing it. I promise." "I know you will," Olivia said, her tone soft but certain. As the two women parted ways, Emily felt an unfamiliar but welcome sense of peace. Her journey wasn't over, but she was finally walking the right path. And for the first time, she truly understood the power of respect, accountability, and grace, not just for others, but for herself. Months passed, and Emily's transformation, while not easy, began to take root. She continued volunteering with the American Center for Racial Equity, finding ways to contribute beyond the surface. From hosting workshops on diversity to using her business expertise to secure funding for initiatives, Emily was finally putting her privilege to meaningful use. Her colleagues began to notice the change. Where Emily once exuded arrogance, there was now a quiet humility. She listened more, spoke less, and approached situations with an openness that surprised even herself. But the true test came on a crisp autumn evening when Emily was invited to attend the center's annual gala. The event, a celebration of progress and perseverance, was a glittering affair, with notable figures from business, politics, and philanthropy in attendance. Emily felt both proud and nervous to be there, knowing how far she'd come but aware there was still so much to learn. As the evening unfolded, Emily mingled with other guests, sharing stories of her work and learning from theirs. But one moment stood out above all. Toward the end of the program, Olivia Brooks took the stage. Clad in an elegant black gown, she carried herself with the same grace and authority Emily had first noticed months ago. "Good evening," Olivia began, her voice commanding the room's attention. "Tonight, we celebrate not only the work we've accomplished, but also the journeys that brought us here. Change, as many of us know, is not linear. It is uncomfortable, imperfect, and often met with resistance. But it is possible. And it starts with recognizing our own capacity to grow." Emily felt her chest tighten. She knew Olivia wasn't speaking about her specifically, but the words resonated deeply. As the applause filled the room, Olivia continued, "I'd like to recognize one such journey tonight. Someone who took accountability and transformed it into action. Please join me in thanking Emily Carter for her outstanding contributions to our programs this year." The room erupted in applause as a spotlight found Emily. Her cheeks flushed, and for a moment, she was paralyzed by the attention. Then, summoning her courage, she stood, nodding humbly in acknowledgement. As the applause died down, Olivia spoke again. Emily's story reminds us that change is not about perfection. It's about intention, effort, and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths within ourselves. Her work has made a difference, and I'm proud to call her an ally. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she sat back down. The weight of Olivia's words felt both overwhelming and validating. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Emily approached Olivia. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Not just for tonight, but for everything." Olivia smiled, her warmth cutting through the formal air of the gala. "You've already thanked me by doing the work. That's all I ever hoped for." Emily nodded, her heart full. "I'll keep doing it. I promise." "I know you will," Olivia said, her tone soft but certain. As the two women parted ways, Emily felt an unfamiliar but welcome sense of peace. Her journey wasn't over, but she was finally walking the right path. And for the first time, she truly understood the power of respect, accountability, and grace, not just for others, but for herself.